Good morning, folks. Glad to have y'all back. This is Brian, the Piedmont Gardener, and we're out here in a muddy garden. It's rained all week, and so there ain't gonna be no planting and no cultivating, but there's still plenty to do in the garden. Good time to pull weeds and take care of some of the chores that you've got to do that don't require you to dig in the dirt. Today, what I'm going to do and what we're going to talk about is training and pruning tomatoes. Alright, so 2 or 3 weeks ago, you got your tomato plants out. You dug a nice big hole, put plenty of amendments in the soil, and now your tomatoes are growing. They went through transplant shock, and roots have taken hold, and they're growing. So if you grow a determinate variety, which I do grow some, you can go with a tomato cage, and a lot of people like to do that. But the way I'm going to show you, which is not the only way, is what I do with my indeterminates. Now, I like to grow my tomatoes up on a stake, and there's a couple reasons for that. It's easy to pick them, and around here we have hot humid summers, and my tomatoes are susceptible to blight. And I don't care what kind you grow, it don't seem to make any difference. I can grow the latest hybrid, or I can grow an heirloom. Fire blight's going to happen. It seems to me like it's part of the life cycle of the tomato. There again, that's why I've told you before, succession planting is one of the keys to having tomatoes all throughout our growing season. So back to the subject, I'm going to show you how to stake your tomatoes, and I'm going to show you, in my opinion, the very best tomato stake that I've ever used. Alright guys, there it is. And y'all are saying, what is that? Well, if you'll look, that is nothing more than a piece of electrical pipe. Years ago, when I first started gardening, of course I've gardened my whole life, but when I first started getting serious about gardening, we'd go up to the hardware store, and we'd buy these wooden tomato stakes, and they worked pretty good. You could get cedar stakes or just a regular old pine stake, and they done the job. But every year when I removed my stakes, well, the bottom would be rotted, and every year my stakes kept getting shorter and shorter, but my tomato plants didn't. So I've tried several different things. I've tried growing them on a trellis. I've tried growing cages, or putting them on a cage. And so I got the idea that if you had a tomato stake that you could use from year to year, sure would make things a whole lot simpler. Now, all this is it's referred to as EMT, electrical metal tubing. It's lightweight. There's not a whole lot of weight here. But it lasts. I've used these for 5 or 6 years, and you can see that the ends are dirty. But what we do, we take this stake, and whatever length you want, it comes in 10-foot lengths, I think, and you just cut it off. I cut mine off to where I could reach them to drive them in, unless you want to get on a ladder. Then you just sort of smash the end flat. I took a hammer and just smashed the end flat on that end of that pipe, and that way when you drive it in the ground, it don't fill up with mud and get heavier and heavier every year. But these are galvanized. They will rust some over time, but I've been using these for 5 or 6 years. They're easy to store. You can stack them all together, put them up in the barn, And then when it's time to stake your tomatoes, it's all you have to do is just grab your stakes, drive them in the ground, you're ready to go. Now let's talk about the cost of this EMT pipe. It's not very expensive, but every pipe that I've acquired has come off a reconstruction. The construction industry is constantly evolving. They're constantly, if you'll just look around you, they're constantly remodeling and redoing all kinds of different businesses. And in that process, this pipe that's used comes out and goes in the dumpster. So if you know an electrician or you know somebody in the construction business, you can get this pipe for free. If not, you can go to the home improvement center and buy EMT pipe. Like I said, it's not real expensive, and it's an investment that will last for years. I don't know, you know, maybe one of these days I'll find out what the limits of these tomato stakes are, but as it goes right now, it's been 6 or 7 years since I've been using this technique, and I've used the same pipes every year. Now, does it hurt anything? I ain't seen that it hurt anything. I thought maybe that it would make the tomatoes, you know, maybe the stems would get hot or something, but I hadn't had any adverse effects using EMT pipe. Of course, I don't pick tomatoes in a thunderstorm, and I advise that you don't come out here. You know, you got a lot of metal out here, but ain't no different in a cage. So let's get to putting a couple of these pipes in and get these tomatoes up on these stakes. All right, as you can see, we've got our stakes in the ground, and all it took was just place them beside the plant and just take a hammer and drive them in. I usually drive mine about 1 foot deep, and they're ready to go. Now let's focus on putting this tomato on the stake, pruning and getting the tomato staked. Now as you can see, this plant here, I'm probably just a little bit behind. This plant has took hold, and it's growing pretty good. It's bushed out. But when I put mine on the stake, I like to have 1 or 2 main leaders that go up. So the first thing I'm going to do is go in here and I'm going to remove the suckers from the plant. Folks call them the suckers. What they are is the side shoots that come out between the leaf and the stem. And it's just common practice to remove these. You're just going to have a bush if you don't. So let's remove what suckers we can. So you can see right in here between the leaf and the stem, there's a little side shoot. That's what everybody calls a sucker. We're just going to pinch that out. Now the next thing I like to do is, like I told you before, we have fire blight in this area. Any of these leaves that's laying on the ground is going to perpetuate that. They're going to make that blight comes out of the soil. So the next thing I'm going to do is remove the lower leaves. And that looks a little drastic, but it's going to help this tomato in the long run. We get all that up, get it cleaned up, get it out of the garden. Now, it's nice and clean down there at the bottom. The only thing left to do is get a string and tie it to this post. And you can use any kind of string you want to use. It don't make any difference. The main thing is don't damage your tomato while you're tying it up. What I'm going to do is just real gently pull them 2 branches together. I'll run my string around and tie any kind of knot you'd like to. I'm just going to tie a square knot. And don't pull it too tight, Don't pinch the tomato up. You can add additional strings as the tomato continues to grow. This is a young plant, and we're just getting him headed in the right direction. All right, so we got our pruning done. We got him tied up to the stake. As he progresses up that stake, those two main leaders are going to continue to grow, and you'll have additional side shoots or suckers that come out on the plant. I'll remove those and keep training up the stake. Every second or third leaf, depending on the variety, you're going to have a cluster of flowers. Don't prune your flowers off. Just let that tomato continue to grow up the stake. Keep it tied about every foot. Anytime that thing starts leaning out, just tie it back and keep it going right up the stake. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back in here below. You remember me telling you that the fire blight comes out of the ground? That's why it's important to use crop rotation. But I'm going to do one more thing to mine. I'm going to mulch around the bottom. That's going to do two things. That's going to keep rain from splashing soil up on the plant, which transfers disease. It's also going to keep the ground moist. When the ground's moist, if you have consistent moisture in tomatoes, you have less chance of them cracking on you after a big rain. Well, all right, guys, I've got a whole row of tomatoes that I've got to get pruned and staked up, and I'm gonna get to it before we get any more rain. But anyway, get out there in the garden, get your tomatoes staked up, keep your fruit clean, and keep that blight to a minimum. I hope that the video helped someone. Until next time, this is a Piedmont Gardener. Y'all have a good day.